I think this video deserves a proper intro because we don't talk about this topic enough. Hi everyone, my name is Aneta. I'm an artist illustrator and welcome to my channel. Today's video is a good old-fashioned time-lapse of the painting you can see behind me. I've spent almost the entire month of February working on it. Honestly, I thought I'd finished it much faster, and originally I had a completely different voiceover planned, but at some point something shifted, and that's exactly what I would like to talk about today. There were so many days when I told myself, okay, today I'm going to dedicate a solid chunk of time for this painting, but somehow when the moment came, I just couldn't bring myself to sit at my desk and actually do it. Even though I had the time, something in my head kept blocking me. And it wasn't the so-called ugly phase when you don't feel like proceed with a piece because you think it won't get better from there. And it wasn't any sort of art block. And I thought that I just felt fatigued. And when I googled the term painting fatigue, I actually discovered it was a term and people were experiencing the same thing I did. We hear a lot about burnout and of course art block. And these are definitely valid topics. I've personally experienced severe burnout before, and honestly probably hundreds of art blocks by now. But painting fatigue feels a bit different, and I started wondering what's actually going on behind it without all of these pretentious methods like just love the process or quit, as if there's no in between. You're either a passionate artist or you're not. I think that's why so few people actually talk about this. Even if you look at the established artists, those with massive followings, they always say they are excited to work on projects. Sure, they admit to some struggles, but overall, they say they love what they do. And I'm just sitting right here wondering, is that even possible to always love the process? The reality is, especially with bigger, more complex pieces, I often hit this point where I feel a kind of painting fatigue. It's not that I want to abandon the piece. I still care about it, but I just get stuck somewhere in the middle. Sometimes it's because I'm actually happy with how it's turning out and I'm scared to mess it up. Other times it's something deeper, something I can't even fully explain. Either way, I think it's time to talk about this more openly. Not every part of the creative process is exciting, and that's okay. Before we jump into the actual voiceover, I have to confess, I didn't really prepare well myself for this painting. My initial idea was to combine two inspirations. First was a painting of Władysław Podkowiński titled, and let me check the English title. It's Frenzy of Exultation, and an illustration by John Bauer that has been stuck in my head for a while now. Originally, I was planning to work on a square painting, and honestly, I still think that idea was great. I actually liked it. But then I changed my mind because here's the thing. I've been doing a bit of reverse engineering lately. I have all these empty frames laying around, and since frames, especially with glass, are getting pretty expensive nowadays, I decided to adapt the paper to fit the frame instead of the other way around. So for this piece I switched to a rectangular format, which meant my whole original plan had to change too. And at that point I told myself, you know what, I feel pretty confident. Why bother making new thumbnails when I have such a clear vision in my head? I thought I could just jump straight into sketching. The first attempt was a total mess. Not only did the composition feel off, the character was leaning too much on the horse, but I didn't want to admit it to myself. I kept pushing that idea forward, even tracing it with a heavier pencil to avoid smudging, since my original plan was to use watercolors. But then I also realized I had placed elements badly on the paper. The horse's head ended up being too low, and its back was practically touching the edge of the frame, so it just looked ridiculous. That's when I had to stop and face the truth. I always preach this sketch is the entire foundation of the painting. If the sketch works, the painting will work. But if the sketch is off, no matter how beautiful the technique is later, it won't save it. So I erased everything and started over. The second sketch was definitely better, but still didn't love it. The character was still leaning too much on the horse, and by that point I couldn't use watercolors anymore. All the old pencil lines were too visible. Even so, I gave it one more shot. By then I was feeling pretty low, especially because the paper I was using wasn't cheap. It was that fancy English brand, though I can't remember the name right now. But I told myself, let's just push through. So I did, and on the third try, I finally landed on a sketch I could live with. At that stage, I wasn't even feeling painting fatigue yet. I was mostly frustrated with myself for wasting so much time redrawing the same thing over and over. It felt like a rookie mistake, and honestly, I should have known better. And with that being said, we can move to the topic I was actually thinking of while painting, which was painting fatigue. I've learned to live with it over the years, but I know there are so many people out there who feel the same way I do sometimes. I'm pretty sure you've already hit that point where you feel completely alone with it. But honestly, I think that feeling of isolation applies to artists at every level, regardless of experience. Like I said at the beginning of this video, we don't talk about it enough. It's almost treated like something shameful, something we shouldn't experience. It's still not a subject we openly address as often as we should. And if you have creative friends, chances are, if you bring it up, they'll probably admit it happens to them quite often too. On social media though, things are different. There's this constant pressure to only show progress, to always post finished work. There's also this unspoken fear among some artists that if they admit to feeling fatigued, they'll be seen as less serious, less dedicated. Burnout can definitely play a role, but painting fatigue is something a bit different. It's tied to something that's supposed to be fulfilling, something you love. It's not just regular tiredness from working too much. It's being tired from the emotional labor of creating something meaningful. It's this weird paradox where you're not just tired, you're tired of the process itself. You still love it, but right now it feels like it's taking more from you than it's giving. Of course, everything I'm saying comes from my personal experience. This particular piece was a large one, A2 format, and I'm not used to working that big anymore. I usually paint on smaller formats like A4 or A3. What's funny is that after this experience, if I go back to A4, it's going to feel tiny. I think one of the first things that contributes to this feeling of being stuck and to the whole emotional roller coaster is actually something really basic, physical fatigue. Because let's be honest, the body keeps the score. Painting, especially when you're working on larger pieces or detailed works, is surprisingly physical. Long hours of sitting, standing, or hunching over the canvas, repetitive motions, blending, glazing, working on fine details, it all adds up. And as you'll see from my process, it wasn't exactly straightforward. I didn't isolate one area and make it perfect from the start. Sometimes I had to go back. Sometimes I painted over things. Other times I completely changed my mind midway. And when the painting starts turning into a bit of a mess, that alone can feel discouraging. Also, I do have ongoing issues with my back, so my neck definitely took a hit. At a certain point, your body literally starts resisting creative work. And I think that's exactly what happened to me this time. I kept dreaming about just waking up, having my coffee and breakfast, and going straight back to painting. But in reality, it wasn't possible because of all the usual responsibilities and constant interruptions. Even something as small as someone ringing the doorbell to deliver an Amazon package felt like a distraction. And those constant little breaks really added up. I honestly think all of that contributed to my body and my mind just putting up resistance to the creative process itself. The second reason I was debating, and I think this might be valid for a lot of people, is mental fatigue, a creative decision overload. A painting, especially a larger or more complex one, is basically 1,000 micro decisions, from color choices to brush techniques to those tiny composition tweaks. When you're deep into a piece, or even worse, juggling multiple projects at once, your brain never stops processing. What's wrong with this section? Should I change the palette? Is the composition even working anymore? Am I overworking it? That kind of non-stop internal dialogue wears you down, especially when it's combined with self-doubt or perfectionism or imposter syndrome. Even small things like mixing the perfect color or deciding how much detail to add can become absolutely draining after hours of work. In my case, it wasn't so much perfectionism or imposter syndrome this time. What really got me, and maybe this won't apply to you, is this frustrating sense that after so many years of painting and drawing, there are certain mistakes I shouldn't still be making, and yet I keep making them. It's like some of these habits are stronger than me, and sometimes I find myself wondering, should I go back to studying the masters again? Well, actually, that's on my bucket list. I'd love to do some small master studies at some point because the truth is, these habits I'm talking about aren't really style. They're just bad habits, like muscle memory gone wrong. And let me be clear, I'm actually a big fan of comfort zones, and I always encourage people to draw what they genuinely like. You don't have to paint human figures if you hate them. If you love flowers, paint flowers. If urban sketching or architectural drawing makes you happy, go for it. But at the same time, I do think it's important to improve the areas you already feel comfortable in, the ones you actually enjoy. Because at the end of the day, if you're painting, say, a vehicle, and you have zero interest in cars or no real understanding of how they work, it's going to be an uphill battle to find both joy and motivation. And I'm definitely talking about myself here. This is something I struggle with. Not just finding joy in painting, but also finding the motivation to actually study the things I know would make me better. So, my advice, both to myself and you, is stay in your comfort zone if it keeps you creating, but at the same time, find your teachers, whether that's master artists, contemporary painters you admire, or even just solid resources. Find those guides who will gently pull you out of those bad habits and help you grow. Because even though I'm really happy with how this painting turned out, I can still see places where I leaned on comfort rather than curiosity. I didn't look up as many references as I probably should have. I used some basic references for certain details like the horse and few animal features, but for the rest I relied way too much on my memory, and it was just stronger than me. I couldn't convince myself to stop and gather better references, even though I knew it would help me grow. The good news is I can fix that, and if you're feeling the same way, you can fix it too. I really believe that going back to thorough studies, whether it's from old masters or just artists you personally admire and trust, is one of the best ways to break those habits and sharpen your skills. The third reason for painting fatigue might be emotional fatigue, when joy gets squeezed out. This is probably the most personal aspect of painting fatigue, but interestingly, it's also the one artists talk about the most, at least in trusted spaces. Painting is emotional. You pour yourself into a piece, or you use it to process feelings, memories, even parts of yourself that are hard to put into words. But when you're working on commissions, the dynamic can shift. Even if you love the piece, it's still work. There are deadlines, client expectations, revisions. All of that can kill your flow. Creating on demand drains the spontaneity and joy that makes painting feel alive in the first place. And for artists who rely on their work for income, especially those constantly creating for social media or content platforms, that creative burnout can feel even sharper. When every piece has to be content or income, it's easy for that deep personal connection to your work to thin out over time. That disconnect between the artists and their work creates a very particular kind of fatigue. It's not just I'm tired, it's I'm creatively empty. And I think that's a huge reason why burnout happens so often, especially for artists who start turning their creative practice into their profession. Now, in my case, this hasn't fully happened yet. I've never sold a piece, I've never worked on a paid commission, and I never had to meet anyone else's creative expectations. So I can't speak from direct experience, but whenever I talk to friends who are working artists, I hear both sides. Some of them actually love commissions. They find comfort in the structure and they enjoy working with client briefs. For them, it's their creative comfort zone. But others, and this is the part that really makes me think, they've completely lost the passion they once had. And honestly, it's heartbreaking. On the one hand, I get it, art as a job is still a job. But on the other hand, it's sad to see people lose the spark that made them want to create in the first place. And this is something I reflect on a lot, because from where I stand, someone who's never worked professionally as an artist, the idea of making money from my art still feels like a dream come true, but I also know that's my romanticized version of it. Objectively, I can see how this kind of emotional fatigue would build up over time, even for people who are technically living the dream. So, if you're someone who's already working in the creative field, I'd really love to hear your thoughts and experiences on this. As I said, I have a general grasp on it, but it's definitely something I'm still figuring out. I know it's real. I just think every artist experiences it in their own unique way. The fourth reason, in my opinion, why painting fatigue happens is actually the fatigue avoidance cycle. And this is where it gets really tricky. The more tired you are, the harder it becomes to start or finish a painting. And the longer you avoid it, the worse you feel about it. That avoidance starts to feel like a failure, and that failure feeds guilt. I should have been painting. I have the time, so why can't I just do it? That's exactly what happened to me with this piece. Right now, I actually have time. It's a good season to focus on these bigger projects. I should be in my studio working, and yet here I am, completely paralyzed in front of the canvas. Instead of grabbing a brush, I'm just sitting there, feeling guilty. And no pep talk, no internal speech can force me to push through that wall. Then there's the second feeling, and this one hit me really hard. Resentment. Why does something I love so much feels this hard? If I tell myself for 9 days straight that I love painting, that it's my passion, why on the 10th day does actually sitting down to paint feel so frustrating? It's like those 9 days of love and excitement don't matter anymore. They just disappear. And finally, there's the classic self-doubt. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I can only get so far, and I'll never be able to push past that. Of course, how much self-doubt you feel depends a lot on your personality. Some people can handle self-critique pretty well. And I'd say I'm one of those people. I actually ask my friends to critique my work all the time. Even when they're brutally honest, I'm fine with it. Like with this piece, a friend of mine was jokingly pointing out some mistakes and I literally told them to shut up and we just laughed. In the end, she admitted she liked it. She just had a couple of small suggestions, so no harm done. But I know not everyone is like that. For some people, even gentle critique can feel very personal, and that's valid too. It's a sensitive topic for a lot of artists. But regardless of how thick or thin your skin is, self-doubt is always lurking somewhere in the shadows. You never know exactly when it's going to creep in, and it's not always something you can control. That's why this whole cycle, fatigue leading to avoidance, avoidance feeding guilt, guilt deepening the fatigue, becomes so vicious. It's not just a bad day or a bad painting session. It's something that can spiral into weeks or months if you're not careful. So I did write down some ideas on how this can be battled, but I admit when I was writing it, not everything applied to myself. I was also thinking about you, the person who's listening. Different things work for different people, of course. When it comes to physical fatigue, I think yes, we need to respect our bodies and it's not laziness. Schedule rest into your creative process, just like with any regular work. Sometimes it's okay to take a break. Sometimes it's also good to consciously take a break, like saying, tomorrow, I don't care, I'm not going to paint. But the day after, I'll sit down, trust me. Make shorter sessions. This is tricky because in my case, shorter sessions sometimes work and sometimes they don't. But if you're someone who's really busy and you can schedule painting moments into your day, this might help. And as I said, basic maintenance, the famous keeping yourself hydrated. For creative fatigue, repeating mistakes plus comfort zone trap. This is the frustration of knowing better but doing the same thing over and over because it feels safer. It's totally normal, but it's also the artistic version of quicksand. So, how to battle it? Well, first and foremost, master studies. Yes, do them. They're humbling, but they break your muscle memory. This is something I've had on my bucket list from the start of this year. I'm focusing on master studies and revisiting some of my art books, thinking deeper about these things. Then I think deliberate practice, focus on weaknesses one at a time, not the whole painting, say hands, fabric, texture, or lighting. References are not cheating. Remind yourself that professionals use references all the time. It's not a crutch, it's a tool. And accountability. If you want to break bad habits, tell someone you trust what you're working on. They'll remind you when you slip back into comfort moves. For the emotional fatigue, when joy gets squeezed out, this is the hardest one because it's tied to your identity as an artist. When the thing you love feels like a chore, it messes with your sense of self. To battle it, reconnect with why you started. Sometimes it's as simple as sketching for fun, with no goal, no social media, no expectations. Create something just for you, a painting that no one will see, something serious, something self-indulgent. When it comes to the vicious cycle, fatigue leads to avoidance, avoidance leads to guilt. I think we need to celebrate tiny wins. Forget finishing the painting, prepare your palette for the next day. That's it. Success. Lower the bar. Not every session needs to be productive. Doodling counts. It's important to separate guilt from worth. You're not a failure because you didn't paint today. You're a human who didn't paint today. That's all. And last but not least, talk about it. Seriously, sharing this struggle, the same cycle, the more you say it out loud, the less power it has. And my final thoughts, compassion and curiosity. At the end of the day, these aren't problems to fix. They're signals. Fatigue, frustration, they all point to areas that need attention. But they're not proof you're failing. If anything, they're proof you care. So the real battle isn't about fighting yourself. It's about learning to work with yourself, even on the hard days. Curiosity helps here. Instead of asking, why am I like this? Ask, what is this feeling trying to tell me? I talked a lot today, but this has been on my chest for a while now. I hope you enjoyed this piece I've made. Remember, I only shared the pretty parts with you, but there were plenty of ugly moments during this painting too. With that being said, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Take care.